having to close down our office. Our headquarters has said that there's no funding left.
This whole I'm not racist campaign isn't going so well.
Why are there so many orphanages that are holding children that aren't orphans?
President Trump tweeted that from September 1st, new tariffs will hit the remaining $300 billion of Chinese imports that have managed to escape the trade war. The latest round of trade talks between the two countries ended just yesterday, and Trump said they were constructive, right before he accused China of reneging on promises to buy American crops and stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. It's already illegal for American robocallers to disguise the number they're calling from and hope that someone will pick up. And today, the FCC voted to extend that ban to calls and texts placed outside the US. That might not stop spammers, but it would let the FCC go after more of them. The rule has already allowed the agency to fine 3 American telemarketers nearly $240 million. The Chinese troops stationed in Hong Kong released this video to honor the Army's 92nd anniversary. But it also manages to make a thinly veiled threat toward pro-democracy protesters. The video aired after their commander made his first comment on the demonstrations and said the violent protests shouldn't be tolerated. Russia's dealing with massive wildfires in Siberia, and the Kremlin says it's got an offer to help fight them from President Trump. That's a surprise, given the president's attitude to fires in his own country. After California experienced its deadliest wildfire season in history, Trump blamed the state for not managing its forests and repeatedly threatened to cut federal funding.
In better times, these dishes and mattresses and bookshelves would have helped furnish a new refugee's home.
I'd like to read Bible, okay?
Oh, yeah.
I like Bible.
Hey, look around, man. See if you find something. Yeah.
This is my card.
You gotta move from here. Where they going?
Well, World Relief Jacksonville is closing.
It's closed, never worked.
Closing, yeah.
But there haven't been a lot of new refugees lately. What's happening here today?
Well, this is a clearance giveaway. We're having to close down our office. Our headquarters has said that there's no funding left past July 31st. So we've got to clean out, turn it back over to the landlord, clean and ready to go.
World Relief in Jacksonville, an office that once resettled as many as 500 refugees in a year, has so far this year taken in just 3.
It's the money. Our funding was per refugee. So for every refugee we got, the more money we had to be able to have staff and be here. But we don't have the money anymore.
That's because under the Trump administration, refugee admissions have reached historic lows. Just 21,000 refugees have been admitted so far this year, a huge drop-off from Obama-era numbers. That policy has trickled down. Over the past 2 years, dozens of resettlement offices across the country have shut down. That also means fewer resources for the refugees who were already here. Ali Al-Daoud worked as an interpreter for the U.S. military in Iraq. He and his wife Jory were resettled in Jacksonville by World Relief in 2017.
It's like a huge work, and we didn't know anything about that. They let us know everything. Actually, they choose the apartment.
They choose the apartment. They pay the rent. Yeah.
They pay the rent for 4 months.
So these are vaccinations.
Yeah.
Vaccinations.
They show you
transportation.
Have you called them for other things in the 3 years?
Yes.
For our benefits, things.
For anything we don't know, we go to World Relief.
Yeah.
So now if it closes, what does that mean?
We don't have eyes.
You don't have eyes.
Yeah. It's bad.
Yeah.
There is people here, live here in Jacksonville. They still need help.
Refugee admissions have gone up and down before. But for longtime World Relief employees like Travis Trice, The current moment has a feeling of finality.
I'm gonna take this last load out.
It's not just the loss of federal dollars. He feels abandoned by the evangelical community.
We're an evangelical organization. I feel like we share a lot of similarities with the president's base, with Republicans. And our thing is, let's look to the scripture, and scripture definitely talks about the rule of law, but it also talks about welcoming the stranger. And right now, I feel like we're heavy on just one of those guardrails.
What's the impact of this place closing? Couldn't you just reopen in a couple years if the numbers go back up?
The infrastructure that has been in place, that's been built up for 40 years, is being torn down at an alarming rate. And it's not something that you just throw back together. It's something that takes years to build. I fear we're not the last. I think there's going to be more, especially if we got another 5 years of this administration.
There are still 2 organizations, Catholic Charities and Lutheran Social Services, resettling refugees in Jacksonville. Elaine Carson plans to volunteer.
I took our last family to the health department Tuesday.
But at some point, you're going to have to say, we don't do that anymore.
Oh.
You'll keep doing this.
I'm free.
You're going to do this no matter what.
Yeah.
Even if you're not paid, if the government doesn't sign off, you're going to do it anyway.
The first 3 years, I was a volunteer. Now I'll be a volunteer afterwards. It is my life.
On June 30th, a New York-based rapper named A$AP Rocky and his entourage were involved in a fight with 2 men in Sweden.
Bro, go that way, bro. Go that way.
Days later, Rocky was arrested by Swedish police for aggravated assault, and he's been held in a jail cell ever since. Rocky, whose real name is Rakim Myers, is pleading not guilty.
Det här handlandet täcks av nödvärn, alternativt putativt nödvärn.
Rocky testified in court today, and the last day of the trial is expected to be tomorrow. If he's convicted, the maximum sentence is 2 years. Meanwhile, several hip-hop artists have announced that they'll be boycotting Sweden on future tours. And President Trump's been conducting diplomacy the way he usually does it, by making demands on Twitter. But it's hard to talk about this case without understanding how the criminal justice system works in Sweden. For example, President Trump has offered to pay Rocky's bail, but he can't because Sweden doesn't have a bail system like we do. In fact, most countries don't.
Countries that have a bail system tend to favor people that have large financial resources, that they have high social standard in the society and are perhaps famous and rich. So I think that's one of the reasons that we see that Sweden does not have a bail system. So it's a way of assuring that everyone is equal in face of the law as well, so that you cannot buy your way to freedom.
Sweden's system tries to make it clear that powerful people and celebrities are not above the law, which sounds nice. But in Sweden, there's no maximum amount of time that a person can be held before their trial. The EU's Committee for the Prevention of Torture has repeatedly criticized Sweden for its long pre-trial detentions, and legal experts in Sweden have been trying to change this system. But there hasn't been a lot of movement until now.
Well, thanks to the situation with A$AP Rocky, now the media, and especially the international media, have put its spotlight on Sweden and its laws regarding pre-trial detention. And hopefully that media spotlight will make the Swedish government change and update the Swedish laws.
This isn't just speculation. Sweden's Minister for Home Affairs wrote in an email last week to Swedish Public Radio saying that he's planning to announce changes to the system soon. But let's not forget that some of that media pressure was because of Trump's timely obsession with Rocky's case, which probably has less to do with human rights than with boosting his own image. Remember, not so long ago, the House passed a resolution calling Donald Trump's tweets about 4 members of Congress racist. 3 days after that, Trump started tweeting about A$AP Rocky. Then he pulled the race card, saying that Sweden's prime minister is letting down Black Americans. It all seems to be part of a new charm offensive to convince voters that Black people like him.
What I've done for African Americans in 2.5 years, no president has been able to do anything like it. The African American community is so thankful. They've called me and they said, Finally, somebody is telling the truth.
This whole I'm not racist campaign doesn't seem to be going so well, considering that a new poll released this week shows that about half of Americans think that Trump is racist. So, to recap, an American rapper getting into a street fight and a president's attempt to use that rapper as a political pawn could push a country to fix its criminal justice system, which I guess is a silver lining of this whole thing. But as a noted political commentator has pointed out, what it probably won't do is change anything back here in the US.
Orphans are lovely and cute, but once you meet them, it changes your entire life because you're never the same.
Alex Davies is one of thousands of foreigners who volunteer in orphanages across Uganda.
I'm very privileged to be a father to 19 wonderful children.
He's a former ESL teacher from Canada who's lived at Love Uganda Orphanage for the last 6 months.
Children. Sometimes abused. Children. Sometimes abused. Children. Raped, kidnapped, and abandoned. Children. Thank God for Love Uganda Foundation. We are no longer orphans, but children of the nation.
So, who do they sing it for? Who was visiting for them to perform for?
Guests from guests like you. Guests foreigners from visiting countries.
This isn't a legally registered orphanage. Officials say that's not unique. There are at least 300 unlicensed children's homes operating without government oversight and funded through unregulated donations from overseas. Do you donate money?
Yes.
Do you mind me asking how much you donate?
I sponsor children here, two boys, as well as to their education, school fees and whatnot.
Now, if Alex comes and joins, so people will know him, so it will spread the news.
So what, are you speaking to people in America and saying, hey, you should come sponsor a child,
Yes.
you should come volunteer here?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Daily. All right, Ryan. Let's get you in the settle. All right? Good night, honey. See you tomorrow.
Unregulated orphanages in Uganda pull in up to $250 million a year from international donors, mainly from the US, Canada, Australia, and Europe. Websites and Facebook campaigns encourage people to sponsor children, volunteer, or sign up for travel packages that can cost thousands of dollars and include a stop at the orphanage. The promise of a financial windfall has pushed homes to recruit as many children as possible, even if they're not really orphans. The number of Ugandan children in institutional care has ballooned from less than 3,000 in 1992 to more than 50,000 today. 4 out of 5 of them have at least one living parent. Immaculate Nakiyimba fell into that category.
Nalina bazadde bange naye nga baali tebasobola kutuweerera, twali bangi ate nga tebalina ssente.
Now she's a farmer with 5 children of her own. In a country where government schools are notoriously bad, only 40% of children who finish primary school can even read, many orphanages have schools attached. The administrator at Immaculate's promised a fully funded education for those who needed it.
Abasobola okusponsalinga abaana era n'agamba abamulekwa.
Immaculate hoped getting an education could pull her family out of poverty, and she liked going to school at the orphanage.
Kubanga n'omuzungu abaali bampeerera baamala Australia ne banga tekyaweereza buyambi eno. Ebyo nabyo ne biggalwawo, kwe kulaba nti nalimanga olumu era ekyaddirirawo we nakoma. tugenda nno kunona wali nku zino enku tezimala.
Who do you blame for your experience?
Ebyo byonna mbinenyezaamu omwami oyo yateekawo essomero eryo, naye kale yagenda n'abagenda, yagenda n'abo abagenda era be yagenda nabo, kati ffe n'atuleka emabega.
In 2016, the government passed legislation to better regulate orphanages.
Okay.
They're now sending local probation officers to places that don't meet national standards.
This is the place. Yeah. So this is the administration.
Joshua Mbozi has been in charge of shutting down orphanages in his district that don't meet the minimum standards for the last 3 years. This orphanage, Save the AIDS Generation, only has 5 adults caring for 120 children. None of them are trained to work with kids. Mbozi gave them 1 week to close.
You have to sign and deliver it to the right council.
No, let me first read it before I sign. This is operating an illegal orphanage where several children are kept without proper care.
Chichi, toy nito yile na kaji wanoti of man. Nza muri kunumiriza muri kunta pressure. Mwindi anokusose mbawire documents. Mwindi anogo kubi mbawire buri kimwe. Bakuwaire sente muri kayo ndikwita kunikiriza. Biwa ndiye ngo, biwa nandisa. Ndida kuruta ndiyo nandisa yo.
The thing is, you said
Bamu we sente ngandibona. Now, let us deal with you. Biwa ya numiriza ngo mna Uganda. Ichi mana idiruzi yeti everything. Biwa ya numiriza. Amana ngamba bantu kwama. Iwaja for office yangu muyange. Yange milioni tano wandi kuwanya.
After being accused of taking bribes from the orphanage, Mbozi quietly dipped out. What about the children here? Are you just going to leave the children here?
We are going to handle that later when you have enough money power.
You don't, okay.
When you have enough money power.
3 orphanages told Vice News that they pay Mbozi so they can operate without a registration. The people at the orphanage, they accused you of asking them for money.
Yes, that's a total lie. They said they are going to give you that they are going to give you evidence that they had the photos.
You never ever asked them for money.
Did you see any photo?
No, but have you categorically never asked the orphanage for money?
Nothing completely.
Why are there so many orphanages that are holding children that aren't orphans in Uganda?
Number one, it's a business.
It's a business.
And they are convincing the Americans that we are supporting needy children.
Barbara Carmichael, a healthcare administrator from Colorado, donates around $200 a month to Save the AIDS Generation. She started donating to and visiting the orphanage 5 years ago after seeing an appeal for help on Facebook. The Kamuli district authorities asked us to accompany them on a raid, they said, of an orphanage that wasn't licensed, wasn't registered, and was being run illegally, and the conditions were not very good.
I mean, obviously they need to get a permit if they didn't have one, because I wasn't aware of that. However, what's going to happen to these kids if they shut it? Where are they going to put them? A lot of those kids have nowhere to go.
Do you think that this is an issue for Ugandans, or this should be an issue for Ugandans rather than people like yourself?
I don't think that's ever going to happen, and I'll tell you why. When people are desperate, when people are starving, they're always going to reach out to someone that's going to help them. So they're not going to go to their government.
Mondo Chateka helps oversee the government's effort to shut down illegal orphanages. How long has it been going for? Your plan to get rid of illegal orphanages?
For the last about 4 years.
But why is it taking so long?
So we don't want just to pounce on them because they are human beings in these homes. We give them an opportunity to be able to correct the wrong.
Do you know Joshua Mbozi?
I know Joshua as the probation and welfare officer.
What is his reputation?
I may not be able to talk about his reputation, but I know that Joshua has been on the job for some time, I know some probation and welfare officers have been compromised.
We've spoken to more than one person who say that they have been approached by Joshua Mboisi and that he's tried to extort money from them under the threat of potentially closing down the orphanage.
The point I want to make is that nobody should be asked for money.
So why would Joshua Mboisi be asking for money?
Corruption.
So can you guarantee that there's going to be a full investigation?
I promise you it's going to be total. We are going to follow up until we get to the bottom of the problem.
But more than a month after Save the AIDS Generation was raided, children still live there. The orphanage tells Vice News that it's now in the process of getting registered and that it paid Mboisi another $250 to keep operating in the meantime. Allegations Mboisi denies. The government in Kampala, meanwhile, hasn't finished its investigation yet.